Was there a better adolescent pastime than sitting around talking about the guitarists of Ozzy? Sure, maybe throwing cherry bombs in toilets or asking 19-year-olds to buy you cigarettes, but basically no. And while we're here to talk about the guitarists of Ozzy, let me start by saying we're absolutely not going to talk about Tony Iommi, because Tony Iommi was not a guitarist of Ozzy. Ozzy was a singer of Tony Iommi. And I mean that in the sense that Tony and Geezer 2 really ran Sabbath HQ in the heyday. Ozzy was a great singer and frontman, but he really lived up to the uncontrollable train wreck animal who could barely be kept propped up long enough to do the gig stereotype. And eventually this got to a point where they just couldn't take it anymore, and they sacked him. Totally understandable. They weren't his mother. Hey Oz, get your shiz together. But what happened makes me actually feel bad for Tony and the gang, because while newly fired Ozzy's drinking himself into oblivion watching cartoons in an apartment, and Black Sabbath is preparing to shape up and take on the world with new frontman Ronnie James Dio, a young Sharon not yet Osbourne comes along and basically kicks Ozzy's ass into gear like the mother he needed. She becomes his manager and later his wife, and she continues to just kick his ass from completely derailing miraculously for many, many years to come. So Ozzy just goes on this completely reckless yet relentless ass-kicking spree through the 80s and 90s, while Sabbath just toils in relative obscurity. It's got a sting, and it's not really fair, but unfortunately what Ozzy needed in order to continue to even barely function just couldn't be provided in the dynamics of Black Sabbath. However, if Ozzy was going to really rise up on his own in a nu metal arms race against Black Sabbath into the 80s, he was going to need, among other things, a pretty kick-ass gunslinger of his own. Enter Randy Rhoads. We all love Randy. Come on, this is the legend. A classically trained virtuoso just wailing through Marshall stacks with the Les Paul and doing effortless, tasteful trickery at every turn. We know, but what's important about why he worked is worth talking about. He was tearing it up already with his burgeoning LA band, Quiet Riot, and he supposedly only auditioned for Ozzy at the urging of a friend. Of course, Ozzy heard 5 seconds of this dude playing and was like, oh my god. So, in a rather passive manner, young guitar god Randy Rhoads comes into the fold. But this union provides an important advantage for both Oz and Randy. For Ozzy, coming from the world of Sabbath, which operated in mergings of early metal and classical music and the occult in a very primitive way, Randy's trained background in classical, plus his fiery virtuosity, just took this concept and rocketed it into the stratosphere. And for Randy, Quiet Riot had not been an avenue to unleash all this classical metal wizardry, and he wasn't able to excel at his full potential there. So for 2 albums, 1980's Blizzard of Oz and 81's Diary of a Madman, Randy and Ozzy and bassist Bob Daisley and drummer Lee Kerslake participate in this alchemy that results in enough elixir to leave all that was before in the dust, you know, Black Sabbath, and begin the truly unexpected ascent of Ozzy Osbourne, the solo artist. In this 1981 performance of Crazy Train with Quiet Riot bandmate Rudy Sarzo on bass and Tommy Aldridge on drums, we can really see Randy's mastery on full display. His tone is like 70s hard rock overdriven Marshall distilled into perfection. His choice for when to flash is impeccable, coming in when Ozzy lays out or finishes lines to do things like wild pull-offs, pinch harmonics that guys like Dimebag and Zakk Wylde would later make signatures, elegantly phrased fill runs, tapping but not like Eddie Van Halen, lots of fast picking, shredding, and scale running. And this one brilliant move where, while doing a trill, he reaches his picking hand over to bend the string from behind the fretting hand and create this very fluid bending trill. Tony Iommi may have been Riffmaster General, who walked hooded and slow around his cauldron and was so badass he didn't need to run. But this kid was flying and casting spells from the air. This performance of Mr. Crowley really showcases more of the classical influence and also gives us a chance to see Randy wail on one of his other signature axes, the famed polka-dotted flying V. Here he weaves through scales and arpeggios and chord changes like a winding, twisting snake that can assume any form for any purpose. Another cool thing to note about the differentiation of this new solo career, post-Sabbath Ozzy, is how they really managed to merge light and dark. Even Mr. Crowley with its droning doom isn't doom like Sabbath. There's so much light shining in sonically, in the way the chords and melodies are voiced and constructed. It's where die-hard Sabbath heads can claim dominance, sure. When it comes to full-on doom, Sabbath wins. But what they did on Blizzard and Diary, however intentional or accidental, was brilliant to set them aside. And for the masses who don't necessarily want all doom, it gave them a very lucrative bridge to cross. This all didn't last long, though. For one thing, Randy was rumored to already be planning his departure, both to deepen his studies into classical guitar and music theory, but also to get away from the maniacal and barely functional addict that was Ozzy. But before it could even happen, Randy was killed while on tour in March of '82 in a freak joyride plane crash piloted by a coked-up tour bus driver. We're not going to go into the details here, but it's a wild story in itself worth looking up. Randy was only 25 years old when he died. He didn't even make it to the 27 Club, and his most famous solos were recorded at age 23. Supposedly, the last conversation Ozzy and Randy had before Randy's death was Randy chiding Ozzy about his drinking and drugging, and literally cautioning Ozzy that it would be the death of him.
It says here, the word madman almost always precedes his name. Welcome, please, Madman Ozzy Osbourne.
So pretty much immediately after Randy's death, Ozzy soldiers on, talking about it on Letterman and saying that's what Randy would have wanted. This interview is 6 days after Randy died. 6. And really with Ozzy, the only other option was probably just drug binge, so might as well play music and drug binge. An Irish guitarist named Bernie Tormé jumps in quickly to help, doesn't really fit the needs. Then Ozzy settles on Brad Gillis of Night Ranger, who does record a live album of Sabbath covers in his tenure, but Randy's real replacement comes with Jake E. Lee. Jake reportedly comes Ozzy's way at the recommendation of Dana Strum from the band Slaughter, who is coincidentally enough the same friend who urged Randy Rhoads to audition. And another fun fact is George Lynch from Dokken apparently was the other guitarist up for the gig at the time, even getting the actual offer first and then having it rescinded. Oh, what could have been. Anyway, Jake had played with Rat early on and even briefly rehearsed with Ronnie James Dio, Ozzy's first replacement in Sabbath, but coming into the Ozzy fold was really his first big gig. He's definitely the most underappreciated of Ozzy's guitarists. He was also classically trained and totally capable of filling Randy's shoes for one thing, and he brought some modernization that the Ozman could really benefit from with him. If Randy helped leave Sabbath behind and enter a new solo career chapter, Jake really helped that solo career fully enter the 1980s. Randy's tone was classic Marshall stacks, but Jake had that more saturated, wet, and highly sizzling 80s metal guitar tone. And Jake's look was more modern for the time too. The man could pull off leather pants, shirtless vests, armbands, big white boots, big frock of hair. He looked like a Sunset Strip superhero. And he absolutely had the playing to back it up. The main riff for Bark at the Moon off the '83 album of the same name takes moving chord voicing like Randy played in the Crazy Train verse and kicks that concept up to 10. It's fast and careening. Jake E. Lee is like the Corvette in the night. He goes by fast in a red blur of taillights. To put it bluntly, the dude can shred. And he's also still completely musical. 1986's single Shot in the Dark off of the Ultimate Sin album is a great example of all things wonderful in the Jake E. Lee era. Very slick pop metal guitar riffery all over the main sections, complemented with sparkly, clean, chimey guitars that shine in the dark on the verses. And a solo that kicks off with some really nice long notes that I'm pretty sure are played on a slide in the studio. Then transitions to a quick burning display of flash that doesn't overindulge or wear out its welcome and deftly hands back off to the super hooky chorus. That is glam metal mercenary work right there. If there's one Ozzy song that you're gonna go cruising down Main Street at night with the cool kids in your super sweet convertible to, it's this song. They literally even put it in the video. So with Jake, it really all seemed to fit and work. But for reasons unknown, after the Ultimate Sin, Jake got the axe too. Supposedly it came as a surprise, as he felt he and Ozzy were on good terms and all was cool, but both in front of the cameras and behind the scenes with Ozzy, things were always chaos, and in truth, who knows? Ozzy himself was barely sustainable, so why would any working relationship be? Nearing the end of the 80s, we bid adieu to Jakey Lee and welcome in a Jersey kid with a whole new perspective. The story from Zakk Wylde goes, Ozzy just saw Zakk's photo on a pile of demos sent in by hopeful guitarists and thought, this kid looks like he likes Randy Rhoads. And with his lean build and mop of blonde hair and probably a Les Paul slung, yeah, totally. And also, yeah, Zakk did know Randy's work and Sabbath. He was a disciple for sure. But also, like Jake, he brought a lot in that wasn't there before and at a good time to do it. I think with Zakk, he lucked out even more because he was really ahead of his time in proto-90s in a lot of ways no one even was aware of at the time. Zakk also wasn't just versed in the world of heavy metal and Black Sabbath, he was kind of equal parts southern rock infused, studied in the Book of Allman Brothers and Skynyrd. While Ozzy saw a little Randy, he was really like a heavy metal cross between Randy and Iommi and Duane Allman or something. Those southern flavors don't come in bold right away. With 1988's No Rest for the Wicked album, Zakk is shooting pretty straight metal, but you can even see from his onstage persona that he's a little more down and dirty, often shirtless in a pair of leather bell-bottoms, hair not teased up into the ether, Les Paul slung low and legs spread wide, ready for all sorts of attack. Here on stage with Ozzy and Geezer freaking Butler, who'd also bailed from Sabbath at this point, plus Randy Castillo back there, playing the album's lead single Miracle Man at just over 20 years old, he had to feel pretty on top of the world. We really get more of Zakk's flavor, as well as some real helpful sonic transmutation with 1991's No More Tears album. A couple of things right off the bat is the single No More Tears itself is a drop D flat tuning. So drop D and then all the strings down a half step. And the song makes heavy use of distorted slide. We heard a few slide licks from Jake on the Shot in the Dark solo, but here Zakk is churning out a whole nasty riff on slide. The metal here is heavy in that mid-tempo, just plain tough way. The way Jake really pulled Ozzy into the 80s, Zakk really progresses things into the 90s. He's also making regular use of those squeals we occasionally heard from Randy. It practically becomes a calling card and a staple for many new guitarists to use. To finish out the guitar solo, we get some really fast pick work that pulls from 70s southern rock, and it folds into Ozzy's hard-rocking metal sound seamlessly. Make no mistake, there's a little Freebird in there. And the opening riff and solo to the album's ballad, Mama I'm Comin' Home, are a full-on hick-lick paradise. Now see, that's amazing. Zakk melding the music of this one-time slaughterhouse worker from Birmingham, England with American Southern rock and making it totally work, and doing it all as we make an insanely stark cultural decade transition. The video was directed by Samuel Bayer, who also directed the video for Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, and the lyrics were written by Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead. That Lemmy, writing us such a nice, pretty song. And it also gives us a chance to observe some of Zakk's really tasteful compositional picking and strumming. As well as a soaring solo full of long crying notes, proving that he can pull it back and shine without the flash. Now, the tour for No More Tears is called No More Tours, and supposedly Ozzy's gonna retire, and he tells the band all to find and take other gigs afterwards. So everyone gets going doing other stuff. Zakk starts his solo career, even jams a bit with Guns N' Roses, but it never amounts to anything. But by the time Ozzy's realized retirement sucks, everyone is dispersed. Ozzy briefly jams with Steve Vai and rumors buzz, but it never amounts to anything. And Ozzy ends up getting Zakk back to record the next album, 1995's Osmosis. But Zakk can't do the tour. After a brief fling with Alex Skolnick of Testament, Joe Holmes, an LA kid who comes at the recommendation of Osmosis drummer Dean Castronovo, steps in and gets the gig. Joe is tragic in that he goes on to serve a tenure around as long as Jake and Zakk have before him, but no Ozzy albums happen in this time. Eventually, he's gearing up to record 2001's Down to Earth, but Zakk ends up coming back and doing that album. Anyway, Joe Holmes was an actual student of Randy Rhoads in his youth, and Ozzy claims in interviews he can see Randy's fingers when he plays. He also had replaced Jason Becker in David Lee Roth's band when Jason came down with ALS. He comes across on stage more like a heavy metal John Frusciante, shirtless with baggy camo pants and a Strat hung low, long hair obscuring his face. He's perfect for the Ozfest era, which begins in 1996. And that's kind of what happens. Ozzy really starts to transition into what I would call his pre-Legacy or first Legacy era. Less focus on making albums, lots of Ozfesting, playing the hits. And then really once Zakk steps back in, he's in for a while again. There's also a random covers album in 2005 with Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains on guitar. But really, after the star-crossed Joe Holmes, there's only one more Ozzy guitarist to mention. In 2010, we get the album Scream with new guitarist Gus G. Gus comes from a background of more modern melodic death metal and power metal, playing with bands like Dream Evil, Arch Enemy, and Night Rage. And especially in hindsight, it's a move that I think was really cool and gives us a final leg of Ozzy the artist before full Legacy mode. For one thing, what we call heavy metal has changed a lot over the years. What used to be heavy metal at one point in time is now really just hard rock or whatever. And these classifications can become a point of great contention. I think the changes and developments of music are just really cool, and it's better to not get too stressed about it. Have fun with your philosophical metal classification ponderings. But the bottom line is Ozzy's sound was not the modern metal of the era anymore. And bringing Gus G in gives us a chance to look at Ozzy one more time in an updated metal context. Gus's playing is clean and surgical and goes right for the jugular. His tone is very heavy and thick and highly rectified. He looks great decked out in black with a black vest and big black boots and long black hair and a black ESP star. And he's a well-versed technical player who knows the deal. So he works in all sorts of little isms of Ozzy guitarists' past to make us all feel a little bit at home throughout the album. Then, for 10 years, there is not another Ozzy album. Close to the end of that 10 years, Gus leaves and Zakk ends up coming back again. But really, from this point on, Ozzy albums kind of become a big love fest full of lots of different guests like Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Mike McCready, the man himself, Tony Iommi, Slash, Tom Morello. I mean, why not? This is full-on Legacy Ozzy era now. Might as well spread the love and celebrate. But it's pretty safe to say that Zakk really, when he originally came along, kind of became the guy. Zakk himself lovingly refers to Ozzy as the boss. At the time of making this video, Ozzy is really just gearing up for a couple of farewell shows. Now, Ozzy loves to unretire, but noting some health concerns, I think we gotta believe him this time. Hey, the dude has been riding the crazy train for a long, long time. He pissed on the Alamo and he bit the head off a bat. Hats off to the madman. As for us, did we learn anything here today? Well, no. Did we do anything cool here today? Yeah, we talked about Ozzy's guitar players. And now that we've done that, I guess I'm gonna go light some cherry bombs and flush them down the toilet. Hey, if anyone asks, you didn't see me, alright? Alright, cool.